right, can we settle down, please, so we can kick off? We have 1 minute to start, 1 minute. And I know a lot of us are still trying to get used to it, but try to keep your masks on. We can get through it for an hour. Thank you. All right, good day, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'd like to first of all start off with acknowledging Her Excellency, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, for having us here today. Thank you very much, ma'am. Also, the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs and Social Development, Dame Pauline Kedem-Talon, is here. Thanks for being here, ma'am. The Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, is also here with us. Thank you very much. We also have with us the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator for Nigeria, His Excellency Mr. Edward Callon. Thanks for being here today. Welcome, of course, to all the members here of the youth community. Interestingly, the United Nations age for youth is between 15 and 24. So a lot of us here do not count as youth. But we have an unofficial age in Nigeria of 55, so you can settle in very well. And of course, those of you joining us online virtually across the world, thank you very much for being here today. It's very important that I point this out. We're here to have a conversation. We're not here to throw questions per se at our hosts and of course our special guests here. The whole idea for them, most importantly, is to listen to us have a conversation about our issues and what we want them to take home from this. So let's bear that in mind as we move along today. I want to start this off very quickly with everybody here looking up at a slide. So just take a look at your screens to see some very vital information that would help us just wrap our minds around what we'll be talking about today, about young people. I'm sure a lot of us know the statistics. About 63% of the population of Nigeria is under 25 years old. That's 130 million strong young people who have such amazing human power that sometimes feels unharnessed. 23%, of course, is above 54. 35 to 54 years old is about 14%, but it's very important to focus on that demographic that 63% of the young population of Nigeria is 130 million of us strong. Interestingly, there's an estimated 500,000 graduates per year, which is currently close to 2 million enrollment across the country. 500,000 graduates are churned out every year. 500,000 graduates. 60% of new graduates earn less than 50,000 naira a month. By today's exchange rate, that's just above $100. 42% of employed recent graduates got their jobs through personal contacts. So, like we say in Nigeria, who know how you take enter. Now, this is a very critical part of the issues that we'll probably be talking about a lot today, and an issue that bothers a lot of Nigerians is unemployment. The youth make up 50% of the labor force, but even at that, 63% are unemployed or underemployed. Now, underemployment is a very touchy subject for a lot of people. People tend to wonder why that word exists. But close to 28 million of the youth population is out of the labor force. That's about the population of Ghana, just to put it in context for you. A whole nation of people are out of the labor force. This particular slide is very, very important to me because a lot of us are passionate about change, about just being a part of governance in this country. And it's the next slide about the voting patterns. 51% of the 84 million currently registered voters are between 18 and 35 years old. But overall turnout in the country has been pretty much abysmal. If you look at the chart there, the blue line represents parliamentary and the black is for the presidential. The presidential is usually more popular for a lot of people because we like to focus a lot on the center. But even at that, in 2019, it was below 40% participation. Below 40% of the population determined who became president. Even lower voted for those who make the laws that govern you today. So think about that very critically as we go on today. A lot of us have been talking about getting into the mix and being a part of governance, and participation in leadership positions is something that a lot of us continue to have conversations about. And now just 27 members, that's 8% of the members of the House of Representatives are between 30 and 40 years. Just 8% of our representatives. Out of that, only 13% and 27% of candidates for the Senate and House of Representatives were less than 35%. So we're not talking about those who made it in. Those who were actual candidates, only 13% for the Senate and 35% for the House of Representatives were less than 35 years old. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we kick off the conversation today. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to have very honest conversations and just keep all of that in mind and understand that it's a broad conversation we're trying to have in such a limited time. So keep your comments as precise and concise as possible. Nigerians get bashed a lot for liking to be verbose and talk too much. Let's show them that we're different and get straight to the point. I'm going to start with Rinsola Abiola. Very quickly, and let's just quickly address the elephants in the room. The NSAS protests are still very fresh in a lot of people's minds. But there's also now talks about what do we do with that momentum now that we're off the streets and we're trying to make use of conversations and interactions. How do we move from rhetoric to action, sort of breaking the culture of impunity and building a culture of accountable governance?
So essentially, as it is with other previous attempts at citizen mobilization and at bringing change, it's important to organize and it is important to engage. It's important to organize and it's important to engage. As you pointed out when we started, 51% of registered voters in Nigeria fall within the youth bracket. What this tells us is that we actually do have the numbers to make change happen through the ballot in this country. Half of the total number of registered voters, for instance, if they voted as one, would be able to deliver a presidential candidate. So this is the kind of power that we need to realize that we have. It's very important to know how to move from anger or wanting things to happen to actually making those things happen. We have established systems that we can engage through. There's the parliament, we have leaders at different offices, at different levels of governance that we need to be able to engage. And we also have to sustain the advocacy. We have to participate more actively in the elections process. Politics is a game of numbers. Politicians may not respect anything else, but they respect stakeholders who have the numbers required for them to win elections and for them to further their political aspirations. So as young people, it's not enough to say that we have numbers. In acknowledging those numbers, we need to know how to use it as a potent weapon for making our voices heard and for driving change in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rinsola. She's also the founder of Equity Now for Women and Girls. Still keeping up with the conversation, I want to come to you now. Hamzat Lawal. Hamzat is a governance advocate. And the talk about trust has come up a lot since the protests happened, sort of a trust deficit between Nigerians and the government. How do we start rebuilding relationships, expanding instead of, and more or less closing the civic space between government and the people?
Well, thank you so much. Just reflecting from our experience with Not Too Young to Run and what we saw with NSAS, and with the shrinking civic space and clampdown and peaceful protesters and activists, civil society leaders, and of course, also putting this side by side with what Madam Minister had told us months ago, that over 3,000 women were abused. And with the fact that there's lack of information, and for us, rebuilding trust and engaging in governance and allowing peace to reign. With the impact of COVID-19, because again, we cannot shy away from the fact that COVID-19 also played a critical role on what we've seen over the few weeks. And in rebuilding trust, what is the role of data and how are we collecting this data? How are we ensuring that decision and information is based on this data? And how are we also putting resources to this data in also reflecting how are we creating jobs? And not just creating jobs, but creating sustainable jobs, decent jobs that leads to economic growth and increasing Nigeria's GDP. And lastly, just to close, young people have made their voices heard. We should all be worried. We should be worried because without peace, without unity, and without integration, intergenerational equity, we might explode. And Nigeria is an important player in the global economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamzat. We're just trying to get some heat out so that we can have a few conversation starters. And I want to come to you now, Loretta. And I want to talk about unemployment. Loretta Ofuri is a Girl Power Initiative advocate. What are your thoughts on rising youth unemployment? How do you think we can start having conversations around looking at it, stop spiking, and looking at a downward trend going forward?
Thank you, Ebuka. Sadly, Nigeria has a very high rate of unemployment, and we have the population that, if will and health, can build this country forward. To reduce unemployment, I think we have to start being gender specific, because for any society to thrive, it's very good when we analyze the gender situation and drive towards closing the gap. If so many women out there are employed and have sources of income, which is going to help their families, be it in the skilled workforce or in other lower sector, is going to help, because there are sources of income coming in, and they can also help their children. And when education is being put into place, the industry can also increase. So in reducing unemployment, we have to think of education first of all, both formal education and informal education. And if a woman is not safe, has sexual reproductive health and rights, and not in good state of health, she can't flourish productively. So all that put in together could help a lot. Thank you, Ebuka.
Thank you very much. So just for those who are joining us virtually, we have a sign language person online as well. So for those of us who will be needing that. I think we have someone who's joining us virtually now, Ayodeji Oshowobi. And Loretta there did mention women, and I think I want to talk about that because it's also been a critical part of the conversation, using a very safe word, safety of women. and girls in public and private spaces. Gender-based violence has continued to be a part of, sadly, our daily discourse. And I want to hear from Ayodeji Oshobi, your thoughts on that. Okay. While we wait to get that connection, it's been the reality of 2020, grappling with technology and all of its nuances and all of that. We'll get back to Ayodeji because that's a very, very important conversation that needs to be had. But let me come to you now, Adebola Williams. You are a Pan-African entrepreneur, and I want to get your reflections on the need for young people to listen. And I think that comes up a lot because there was a lot of talk about that while the NSAS protests went on. I said, these children don't listen. You people seem to just want to have your way without necessarily hearing the other side. How do we start to act on these grievances while demanding what we want, but also hearing what we need to hear?
Thank you, Ebuka. Thank you, Madam DSG. Honorable Ministers, thank you. It's good to be here. I think you might have invested the pre-conversation. My point was actually that government, donors, international organizations, DFIs, and co. must listen more to young people, not the other way around. If 63% of the population of Nigeria, 130 million, as I said earlier, are young people, then everyone is working to create and shape a future for them. You cannot create a future for people that you don't understand their needs, their desires, their aspirations, what makes them tick. And so a deliberate attempt to actually collect the data of the pulse of young people is what would help shape an accurate future for them, to enable them, and to also ensure that we put them in the center of execution, knowing that for a fact, whatever future they create has more impact and has a higher potential to be in tune with the future your own children and generations to come will need. And so a few action points that I thought might help the intervention would be that, both the United Nations, the Ministry of Youth, the Nigerian presidency need to commission urgent data collection on the pulse of young people, video, polling, and more. We need to introduce town hall meetings, both in smaller communities and then national town hall meetings, to continue to use that feedback to co-create the kind of future that we want. We also need to use the media in forms and ways that young people understand. It's the truth. People, the potential of young people that watch NTA these days has reduced drastically. How do we use the content that they consume? Music, humor, comedy, amongst others. And so, I think that we're at a point where organizations like the United Nations must move away from the usual programs that they do, classroom-style teaching, all those interventions, to be more flexible to a generation that is disrupting, that are creators, innovators, and inventors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adebola, and thanks for your points. But you're the second person now to talk about data, and that's obviously very critical. Is Joshua Alade here, the Youth SDG representative? I want to come to you, Joshua, and your thoughts on why data is so important in these conversations we're having.
All right, thank you very much, Ebuka. Happy to be here. And one of the things I would say about data is, I think about 3 months ago, my team, we worked around understanding the aspirations of young people when it comes to decent work. And one of the things we found out about data itself is that we had about 200,000 young people across Nigeria who shared that this is the kind of work I want. And we actually want the government to pay attention to jobs like this. And one of the things I would say is there was a lot of emphasis around investment in retail, ensuring that the government pays attention to tourism. And the data is there to show, because if you look at it, about 50% of the young people who took the survey said something that for them, they feel the reason why they do not have jobs is because they do not know anybody. So connection is something there. And then another part of the data is really analyzing to say, I would really want government to pay attention to capacity development for young people. And the data is out there. It's something we've also shared with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and ensuring that we have meaningful youth engagement going forward.
Thank you very much. Do we have Ayodiji now online? So she can make her contributions, like I said, about gender-based violence, safety of women and girls, pretty much across the country. Ayodiji.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ebuka. All protocols duly observed. The issue of sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria is not a new phenomenon. It's something that we all know. But over time, our strategies to respond to them has not been holistic as much as it should be. For instance, there are young people within universities who face sexual harassment from their lecturers and even non-academic staff. And since 2016, the sexual harassment policy has been before the House of Assembly. Recently, it passed the third hearing before the Senate, but it's yet to be introduced before the House of Representatives. When we clamor for young people to get education and be well educated, we also need to ensure that such spaces are safe for them to learn from. And if they experience any form of sexual violence or sexual harassment, there is adequate support for them, and those who are guilty are actually brought to book. The issue of Sex for Grades, for instance, a documentary that was done in 2019 highlighting the spate of sexual harassment, did show a number of lecturers being caught in the act of sexually harassing students. Until date, we haven't seen any justice being carried out or meted against these persons. This doesn't really encourage young people to come forward to share their stories. And it's also important that we diversify power between students and the lecturers, because there's a power imbalance between these two people. So how do we begin to ensure that we empower more students to come forward to speak up and also take power from lecturers who abuse the authority? But if we move away from sexual harassment and we look at sexual violence in general, during the lockdown, the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs had said that about 3,600 cases were reported. Till date, I am still waiting to see the number of, convicted rapists or number of cases in court that is similar to the number of cases that were reported. This shows that we have very minimal prosecution rate in Nigeria, which we all know is a problem. And we need to definitely encourage having more sexual assault referral centers across Nigeria. Because when you get raped and you're not able to get emergency response, you really cannot get evidence that will be useful in the court of law. So we need to look at the systems that we need to have in place that can, help to prevent sexual violence, but importantly, help to respond to such issues when they happen. And if we go to the very end of the spectrum in terms of, young women's participation in politics, some young women I've interfaced with have said that they would never run for office because it's not safe for them to do so. If they are not, harassed by community members, they are scared of being violated or they're scared for their safety. So we need to make, political spaces much more safe for young people. I mean, I have experiences of those who were core members who were harassed during election. And for such people, people, they will not be keen on run for office. And we want to get more young people involved in politics. We need to ensure that it is very safe for them to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adeji. And I want to just follow up on that with Costly Aderibigbe, who's female genital mutilation, gender-based violence, and gender equality and empowerment advocate. What's the realistic way? I know she's also made some very good points, but in your view, what's a realistic way, considering the society we live in, all of the factors we like to consider, which we put under the banner of culture? What's a realistic way out of this?
Thank you very much, Ebuka. Thank you. All protocols duly observed. We must understand that the issue of culture is something that has been with us over time. And if we must change cultural perspective to things, it has to take time. But because it has to take time does not mean we'll take it lightly. We have to be, all hands have to be on deck to ensure that we keep working to change some of these things. The issue of female genital mutilation, for example, it's something that is deeply rooted in culture and traditional practices. And when you get to communities to speak to people about this, despite the fact that there are evidences showing that this practice affects women and girls' health, it doesn't have any medical benefits. People will tell you that it is their culture and you cannot take it away from them. So it's something that will take time, but we'll keep working, and I believe that is achievable. So one very important way to change some of this cultural perspective that affect young people, that affect women and girls especially, is consistency. You don't go to communities, you don't go to talk to people and do a one-off thing. You stick to it, you continue to monitor, and you create surveillance in those communities. And most importantly, education is very important for the girl child. When a girl is educated, she's able to raise her voice, she's able to protect herself, and she's able to protect her children. So in as much as possible, we try to talk to older generation about changing this culture. We also need to educate the girl child. We need to intentionally invest in 12 years free, safe education for the girl child and even beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Costly. Miriam Laushi, you are from the Not Too Young to Run platform, and I got a very interesting question from one of our virtual audience members who said, are the youth ready for power?
Thank you, Ebuka. I think that's a really tricky question. You know, young Nigerians are clamoring for it. I don't even think it's an issue of being ready. It's an issue of inclusion. When decisions need to be made, young people, as we've discussed today, that occupy such a huge demographic in Nigeria, have a right to be a part of that leadership, that conversation, and whatever decision is made concerning this country at the end of the day. So of course, among young people, we will have different types, because young people also, we have to understand, are not homogeneous. We are not all the same. So some might be ready, some might not be ready, but the important thing is, what are we even doing to prepare young people to be ready for this kind of position for leadership? It must be taken on through things such as the National Youth Policy. It must be taken on at every level to make sure that if, in fact, young people are not ready, that they are equipped with what is needed. And I think from the conversations we've been having so far, it's clear that the issues intersect. From data to education to sexual harassment to employment, they intersect. And that is why there has to be a holistic approach to this, to make sure that young people are in fact ready to take up this space, because inclusion is necessary.
Very well said there. Abdul Rahman Leme, you are a community mobilizer You're from the northeastern parts of Nigeria. And I'm following up from what Miriam talked about. You know, as a community mobilizer, you obviously kind of have an idea how things work with trying to rally people. What do you find is the biggest hindrance to youth participation in governance?
Thank you, Ebuka. Good afternoon, all. The thing that I find the problem is that capacity, the capacity of our young people. Mariam talked about inclusion, but if you look at most times when we talk about youth problem is we talk about unemployment, we talk about lack of inclusion. But if you go back to how these young people are being trained back in our schools, you look at the issue of capacity. When you go out to mobilize people to attend to whatever development program there is, you find out that there is no capacity, even if you want to engage these young people. So we have to look at, for instance, goal 4 of the SDG, which talk about quality education. We have to prepare these young people to be ready to take up whatever challenge it is there is for them to get involved. So the issue of capacity is very important. And that's where the issue of, that's where it intersects with the issue of inclusion. Because if you are not, you don't have the capacity where even if they want to include you in decision making, you know, you find that there's a problem. So we have to address the issue of capacity, going back to our education system, looking at how our graduates are being trained. You know, you said we have 1 million graduates every year. Are these graduates ready to, you know, compete? Even if there were to be jobs out there for them to take, are they ready to take these jobs? You know, so we have to talk about their unemployability before we look at their own the unemployment issue. And finally, when you have these people trained and given capacity, you look at the NSAS example. You see the capacity of the young people to mobilize for a cause. If you talked about saying that they were saying these children do not listen. Are they trained to listen? Are they trained to channel their grievances in the right channels? You know, do they have the critical thinking skills, you know, to be able to differentiate what is it that if I take a decision today, the emotional intelligence, what is the repercussion of my decision? How are we being trained? So basically, the capacity of young people need to be looked at right from our, you know, secondary university level. So I wish the Minister of Education was also here too, so that we can, you know, channel this kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but his colleagues are here, and I'm sure they are going to get the message to him. We're joined by Musa, I believe, virtually. Okay, I think we're going to wait for that to come. But I want to put everybody on the spot now.
I'm on.
And okay, Musa is here. Musa, can you hear me? Okay, Musa is from the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. And I want you to talk about access, because sadly, it's one demographic that's almost always forgotten in conversations like this. What sort of challenges does your community face, and how should we start realistically addressing them?
Okay. Thank you very much, and all protocols duly observed. Persons with disability in Nigeria, in terms of access, we can say we have less or none. So please, the issue, I think, has graduated from access to full inclusion. And when we talked about inclusion, it's not all about access, but it's also include participation. So in this case, persons with disability in Nigeria does not have the access and also are not allowed to participate. So how do we then achieve inclusion? We are aware that access is not all about access to information, but it also access to infrastructural structures. It also includes access to getting into power. It also includes access to getting economic empowerment. I listened to other participants, and they spoke about intersectionality, where all these issues need to be looked holistically. But in this case, persons with disability are the ones who are worse being hit by this issue. We have women with disability. when issues about sexual harassment is being discussed, do we have a deliberate engagement around women with disability and how they are being daily abused by their caregivers? If we are talking about youth empowerment, are we making a strategic engagement around how we can empower youth with disability, not only to be employed, but to have the employability skills to engage and also live independently? I am happy to announce here that under the presidency of Muhammadu Buhari, we have seen a deliberate attempt in mainstreaming and engaging and making sure that persons with disability has a say. And that's why we want to say thank you to him, particularly for creating the National Disability Commission, which is also headed by one of our youthful leaders, Honorable James David Lalo. And on this context, I want to say that with all this, if we want to achieve both in governance, economic empowerment, health and education, we must understand that disability has two approaches. One, it has to be dealt with as a standalone activity, and one, it has to be dealt with as a kind of three-trunk approaches, where persons with disability will be identified to handled separately, and then they'll also be identified to handled with their peers who are not having disability. So until that is done, we might not say that Nigeria is actually on the path.
Because technology has struck again. Well, Musa, thank you very much. Your points are very, very well noted, and it's good to hear that things are starting to look up. There's a raging debate going on, by the way, online. A lot of people are debating your points about young people being ready. They seem to believe finance is probably the biggest issue, and the fees people pay to get into political office. But like I was saying earlier, I wanted to put everyone on the spot. By show of hands, who still has faith in conferences and talk shops like this? Show of hands. Who doesn't? Let me start with you. Why don't you believe in talk shops anymore? And what do you want to see done differently? Introduce yourself, please. Introduce yourself first.
Yeah, hope everyone can hear me. My name is Nathan Cheyenne. The reason why I do not believe in these kind of things again, and it's not a belief in I'm completely just against them, is we've seen a lot of these things happen over time, years and years and years and time after time. And personally, I'm tired of just talking and no action. A lot of the issues that we're talking about are issues that are not novel. They're not new. They didn't start today. They're issues we've been talking about from time. And the actions that we've seen are little to none a lot of the time, or actions that have happened and have not been checked upon over time. So for me, as long as these conversations are happening and there's a direct correlation to action, I'm fine with it. But if they keep going on and there's no result, I'm looking for active listening turning into results. So that's why personally for me, I'm not so for a lot of this happening if the results don't happen. So thank you.
It's good to know that you don't believe in them, but you still came and showed up on time. So there's still some faith somewhere that we can still win you over. You were raising your hand. What are you passionate about, and how do you want these conversations around what you're passionate about to become action?
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Betta Edu. Really, I think first and foremost, we need to continue to talk. We need to dialogue as young people. We need to be able to make our voices heard and be precise about what we want. While I believe we should be talking, actions must immediately follow the talk. I'd want to say a few things. Number one, it would be important for us as a nation to provide the basic for young people: health care, education, power for them to be able to run their businesses, especially the small and medium-scale businesses that require this. Secondly, the issue of healthcare is important. Access to universal health coverage. The Sustainable Development Goal 3 actually dwells on health and well-being. And for Nigeria to make progress, we need to ensure that there's some form of protection from catastrophic health expenditure, probably through a mandatory functional health system and, of course, healthcare insurance. I would want to talk about inclusion a bit, which is about giving people a seat on the table, young people a seat on the table to decide. Let's feel like we're part of it. Let's feel like this is our voice, this is our decision, and this is our move. Finally, it would be important to build capacity and give us a CV that is employable. Remember, we're saying a lot of Nigerians, a lot of young people are unemployed. We can bring up programs like internship programs that improve our CV, volunteering opportunities in big companies, in private sector, public sector, that can help us become more employable in the society where we find ourselves and compete favorably nationally. So these few points, I just believe that if we continue to discuss and we put actions towards, we'll make progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You raised your hand, and I want to know, because we're here to learn and listen, so more about solutions. How do we start as a nation to start translating a lot of these talks and panels and communiques that we issue every time into actual tautology, actual action, if I may use those words?
Thank you, Ebuka. My name is Odinaka. And to answer your question, I think accountability is very much important. We often see these talks, these panels, these other conversations being gone on, and I feel like they're not putting in the work. Like, they will announce something, the panel will be held, and we'll not hear any feedback or any update about the panel or the ongoing cases in the scape.
Thank you very much. So there are three things that have come up a lot today in these conversations. Data has come up a lot, education has come up a lot, and trust. Are those the biggest issues for young people? Yes? No? Education? Who says education is?
Yes, education, yes.
Is the biggest. Trust? Because a lot of people believe the protests were fueled by lack of trust and continued as a lack of trust, and it has not necessarily ended anyway. So we believe trust is probably the biggest issue. Data is... But data is central to a lot of this, isn't it? Yeah. You want to talk about trust. Go on.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Bazwa from the Northeast Humanitarian Innovation Hub in Adamawa State. So the issue of trust is something I feel is a burning in the heart of every Nigerian, if I may say that. Because a question that I need to I ask myself, what does it take for a Nigerian to be happy? We are very happy people. It takes very little for us to be happy, to find pleasure in the small challenges of life, to make fun of our struggles, to get on by and believe that it's going to be better tomorrow, tomorrow will go better. We have that can-do attitude. But with consistent situations where this breach of trust happens, in the trust we give to our political leaders, in the trust we give to our governors, our president, our ministers, governance is a give and take relationship. As a people, we give our trust and say, we believe you have the knowledge and the capacity to address the issues that I face every day and that my family faces. So when that trust is breached, then we have a breakdown of the fabric of our society. The end SARS protest and the end police brutality protest is a typical example. We could see how we were using different artistic expressions of the issues that we're facing as youth, through music, through dance. it was all peaceful and everything was going great. And I felt like, yes, this is in Nigeria I want to see happen. When we can take a serious issue like this and bring the global stage to Nigeria and say, enough. We need to have a trust in the capacity of the forces to protect our lives. Being in the Northeast and seeing the devastation that's happened in the region through a protracted crisis, every day we wake up to that challenge. And the belief that young people that I deal with every day have is, I might have faced 10 years of insurgency, but as far as I'm alive today and have the right resources, I can make the best of my situation. I spent the last 6 weeks with children from the Northeast that had lost their families and everything. And a resounding thing they kept on saying is, I'm going to be better. And they said something to me, it's like, Auntie Mary, don't worry. We've said thank you, but just watch and see what we will do with what we've learned. And that's the trust. So that's why I feel like trust is very important, and it takes just that to make Nigerians happy and know that our leaders are listening and are ready to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I want to come to you. I'll come to your developer. Let me hear from him, because this question just came up from someone virtually, Benedict Abaidu. And he says, how can you trust people you can't hold accountable?
My name is Lukman Edu, and I represent a company called Social Impact Intelligence. So we're very into data. The first thing I'd like to say is, I think we're talking about politics mostly, right? Nigeria's problems, or the youth problems, are so basic, right? Power, education, health. And the truth is, I don't blame people that take money for their vote. I honestly don't. Why? Because the good and the bad, we're going to election period now. The good and the bad are going to come and say the same thing to us. I'll provide you power. I'll provide you education. I'll provide you school. How do you know, how can you invest in those people's words? How do you know which one to invest in? When we've been disappointed so many times. So why not take a short-term gain? At least you earn that one, than the long-term trust. So the question, sorry, Ebuka, the question you asked me again was, how do you earn the trust, right? How do you show someone accountable? So that's the question. We need to first hold them accountable. How do we hold them accountable? I think that's the first question, because you can't trust somebody that you can't hold accountable, especially in the experiences we've found so far. So I think the question should be, how do we hold them accountable, right? The only way we can hold them accountable, obviously, as we all know, is to vote, right? And I think that one of the things that was brought up here was education. I want to first start by saying that, yes, I appreciate us coming here, right? Yes, we are youth and all of that, but then how much of the youth do we actually represent here? Why I say that now, you gave us such great statistics on the board, right? There's 60% of people unemployed. We're not part of that 60% unemployed. We talk about people that we talk about the people that got jobs through contacts. We probably are that people that got jobs through contacts here. So we're not, as much as we are the youth, there's still the majority of youth in Nigeria is not represented here. Right, where these guys are not educated, these guys are I'm not. So the first thing I believe is the education side, where people need to understand how to approach this, how to get their vote out there. Why I say that is, we talk about politics or elections, right? Is it through the system, like how Rinsola here has done it, going into PDP or APC or is it creating a new political movement? We look at the NSAS situation now, who was really responsible for these things? So I think that there's a level of education that needs to happen first, right? Telling people how to do things or what their rights are and such like that before we can take any step further.
Thank you very much. So Hasumi Opanachi also just put up a very interesting question online, and it's one that affects every single geopolitical zone in this country today, and is also probably at the root of the End SARS protests. She says, why is no one talking about security and how it affects young people?
Hello? Fine. Hi, my name is Kingsley Obiuku. Well, let me just hit the trust before we go down to security. So the thing about the trust is, are we trusting the leaders or are we trusting the system? Because I don't necessarily need to trust the leader to do his job. But if I trust the system that if this leader is going to mess up, the system will take care of him, you know? I wouldn't have a problem. So the thing is, okay, who are you trust? What trust are we talking about? The leaders or the system? We don't need to trust our leaders. We just need to trust the working system if we can create a working system. Then if you're talking about insecurity, insecurity goes hand in hand in unemployment. Personally speaking, I think unemployment is one of the biggest issues we have in Nigeria. Because, I mean, take a look, there are a lack of jobs out there. Everybody feels insecure. If you're working out, if you're driving out of your office, you feel, so you have to always look back, like, okay, let me just say this, yeah? So before the COVID, we had about roughly 8,500 staffs. But after the COVID, we have, give or take, 800, 900 staffs. And we've sent literally like 700 people home to do nothing. For Christ's sake, have you seen the movie? It's a new movie, actually. Have you seen the movie Rattlesnake? The movie was fantastic. I think everybody should see it. There's a big message out there, which I think a lot of people are going to miss out, which is, the movie is about criminals. They're all criminals. But one thing links all the criminals together, which was unemployment, no job. And there was this particular character, I want you to watch his scene, how they recruited him. His name was Ebe. They met Ebe and told Ebe, come and join us, we're a criminal gang. And Ebe said, I was in the army, I got dismissed from the army, I have no job, I have a family, I have children to feed. Yes, I am in. Do you know the amount of people that are waiting for people to recruit them? You know, there's a saying that goes like this, an idle hand is a devil's workshop. I mean, we have a whole lot of idle hands in Nigeria, and it feels like no one's doing anything about it. The government tells you they're going to create jobs. The government is just going to, it will take like an existing parastatal, take a department and divide it. I'm sure a lot of people here can't tell me the difference between FRSC and VIO. To a lot of us, they do almost the same thing, you know? So, I mean, insecurity goes in a way hand in hand with thingy.
Thank you. Still leading on from that, Kelechi Imo also just dropped a comment online saying, how do we then start to reorientate or reintegrate what we have termed, or one segment of the country calls them hoodlums, some others have called them youth too. Debola Williams, how do we start to pull back from where we are?
You know, I'm tempted to want to give you programs and ideas and things that we should do. But I don't want us to lose a very crucial point from this conversation, and that is listening to young people, collecting data. It is the beginning of anything you want to create. You cannot solve a problem if you don't have accurate information on the customer. You cannot provide a service for that customer base. When we talk about education, security, healthcare, the governments on our continent have so lowered what government means that people can say, I'm restraining myself, forgive me. I'm actually very unhappy. But you know, I don't know how we can say that education is what we need. Education is basic. It's a basic responsibility. And in today's world, many people do not actually need to go to the four walls of a classroom. There are many other ways to make success. The young boys who are being harassed by NSAS, many of them haven't gone to school. They are models, they are producers, they are directors, they are actors, they are musicians, they are painters. Artists whose works are being sold in galleries in New York, in London, without any form of education. What the government needs to do is to understand what youth 1, youth 2, youth 3, what can we do that can help accelerate them to achieve their dreams? And that is why data is key. And that is what Dubai is doing. Yesterday, I was talking to Dr. Taruk, the Dubai Cares CEO, on our GenU board meeting. And I mentioned that because I'm in the UN space. And he was talking about how they use data and information, to shape their policies. So Dubai has a minister for the future. They have minister for the future, minister for tech, all kinds of interesting things. So it is crucial. And that is why when you asked earlier about believing in these kinds of meetings, I'm invited all the time. And I always say to them, this should not end in this meeting. We need to get data, and you do not need all of us in this room only to get data. There are channels. You can use Twitter, ordinary Twitter, to get data. You can use Facebook. You can send people on the street. You can do polling. The guys who look my reference, the Youth 2, Youth 3 in Adamawa, in Ibarapa, who are not in this room, how do we find them to get information about them? So I think that the biggest challenge we've suffered in Nigeria and in Africa is government not listening to young people by collecting adequate data for the pulse of youth.
Thank you very much for the passion there, Deborah. That's one vote for data. That felt like 2 votes. I think we have some virtual participants who want to say something. Do we have anyone who has a contribution?
Yes,
Hello.
I have.
I do have.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead. Very quickly, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me quickly say, the truth about it is that we cannot do anything without data. And let me speak to my constituency as a point of reference, a constituency of persons with disability. As it is now, we don't have data that we can even, that government can properly plan for our engagement. And that is also, and when we're talking about data, we are not talking about the numbers. We are talking about relevant information. We are talking about information that will guide government to plan and to execute certain projects or policies. So I want to see beyond the figures of 1, 3, 3, 5, 6, 7. I want to see figures that speak about certain percent represent this, certain percent represent that. And until that is done, I'm afraid we might not achieve much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second votes for data. For someone who doesn't like panels, you are very participatory. I'm not saying you should speak yet. You've become quite interested in this one. I'll come back to you. Let's hear what she has to say.
Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. All protocols duly observed. My name is Onyeka, and I work in promoting inclusive finance for low-income and forcibly displaced women. At the heart of everything everyone has said, no one has actually mentioned creating an enabling environment for all these ideas to thrive. So if there's an enabling environment, there'll be accountability. If there's an enabling environment, there'll be innovation. If there's an enabling environment, there'll be data collection. If we can sufficiently create an enabling environment, all other sectors will be able to thrive. I work in financial inclusion, so I'll kind of delve into that. Today, you have all manner of frameworks that the government comes with, fantastic, laudable initiatives. Implementation is zero. These supposed hoodlums that are being talked about, a lot of people have speculated, oh, these are the same people that you use as political thugs and the rest of them. But at the heart of everything is lack, poverty, and the lack of enabling environment. If we do not create an enabling environment for people to thrive, today we have a fantastic story of the guys that started Paystack, and you have a lot of these fintechs, a dime a dozen. They use their sweats, they use their funds, and they create like a pilot phase or maybe like a 1-year prototype of a program. And at the end of the day, they're just looking for how they can sell it, cash out, and create something else. Now, what happens is that we create these things for us, we sell it to foreigners, and they come back and sell it to us as a service. It's because we do not have an enabling environment. If I know that, okay, I'm going to create something that, the government can easily take off me, I get some, I don't know how it works, the experts will do that, right? People would want to innovate. Nobody wants to be running to Canada at the end of the day because it's really lonely there. But why would I have an education, I have a fantastic result, I can't get a decent job, I can't do the things that I need to do. I mean, I run a foundation, I don't have grants. I use my hard-earned money to do these things. So I think that if we sufficiently create enabling environment, every other thing is going to thrive. Finally, on inclusion, we've talked about young people, we've talked about disabled people. Nobody has talked about displaced people. Yeah, we have displaced people, Madam Minister, that are in different parts of the country. And what a lot of people are not aware is that they actually face the risk of further displacement. So we have people in Kuchingoro IDP camp, we have people in Durumi IDP camp. Unfortunately, I didn't even realize that those camps, those lands are actually lands owned by individuals. So the people in Kuchingoro IDP camp have been told that by January, they have to find their way out of the camp. Where are they going to go? You have people in Durumi, they've given them 1 year. So you have people like us and other people that are working in silos to sort of empower these people. And then we don't have our social protection programs have not been created in such a way that there's accountability for you to actually say, okay, with this program, I have empowered this person. I can trace this social, okay, Empower, you have all this trader money, market money. How have we properly monitored and evaluated from where this person is, that this person was actually at this level of poverty? After this social protection program, this person has moved to this place. So everything at the end of the day comes into having an enabling environment for all these policies to thrive. Thank you very much.
Very well said and very well done.
Thank you. Finally, it's my turn. Okay. I'm just going to be brief because I can see the time is running. Out of everything we mentioned, my name is Farida Kabir, and I'm a software developer and the founder of OTRAC, and we develop software solutions for the healthcare sector. And that's basically why I'm even raising my hand. Out of the conversations that we've had, I haven't heard us touch on technology. And I think technology is very, very important. We haven't talked about how impactful and important it is to the young population. Looking at specifically the EndSARS movement, how technology was able to unite a country as polarized as Nigeria along ethnic and religious lines. It brought people together under one platform, under one goal, which is to end SARS. So when we're having these conversations about young people, we need to actually look at the impact of technology in the lives of young people. I was reading a research from the ICT for Development conference, which was commissioned by the Catholic Relief Services. It said 56% of the global population were active internet users by 2020. And about 97% of the global population is within the reach of an internet signal. So that means we are moving rapidly from the analog era into the digital era. And we need to invest in infrastructure. In as much as we have access to the internet, there is actually a serious digital divide that is going on in the developing countries. If you look at the EndSARS protest again, majority of us came together on the Twitter, but some of these youth that we categorize as hoodlums, they were also part of the protest in one way or the other, but the information was stepped down to them from Twitter down to the community. So that internet is actually very, very important. So we need to invest in infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean having access to internet across board and also having access to affordable and quality internet services. Once we have that, we would be seeing technology and incubation and innovation hubs springing up across the country, and those hubs would actually contribute to increasing employment for the underemployed or unemployed youth, because it would link them to other parts of the world where remote job is actually a thing. Thank you.
I want to lead on from that specifically, right? And talk about two interesting bills that have caught a lot of Nigerians' attention: Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulation Bill, and the National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speech Bill, which people have now called the Social Media Bill. how worried should young people be about these things? And how do we pass the message across to let them know that this is a win for young people and not something that should be fought by government? Did I make sense? You want to take that? Or you don't want to take that? I can go to somebody else. You can take that. I'll come back to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gabriela Adiamo. I'm a student of Law and Jurisprudence, University of Coventry, and a member of the Law Society, West Midlands, United Kingdom. My area of expertise is law, legal reform, the likes of it. I haven't heard a single comment here today about law reform or constitutional reform. Nigeria exists on anachronisms. The legal system we currently operate on is from the Democratic Constitution of 1999. If you look at the Constitution closely through a microscopic lens, you discover that there are a lot of gray areas in the Nigerian Constitution that do not allow for inclusion of the separate demographics of people we have. There is no specific bill or act provided within the Constitution to protect women, children, members of the LGBTQIA+ community, disabled people, and the likes of it. And what I would like to say is, in terms of practical solutions, you would look at the United Kingdom, of which we are a former protectorate of Her Majesty the Queen. They have the Equality Act of 2010. They have the Disability Act of 1995, Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, Data Protection Act of 2008. They have the Care Act of 2005. They have the Same-Sex Marriage Act of 2013. Over the years, as the country has evolved, the citizens have evolved also. Different demographics of people which exist within Nigeria as Nigerians have come up to the public eye, piggybacking off of the point of how most young people of nowadays are creatives and the likes of it. There is no provision within the Nigerian Constitution to protect the rights of the separate demographics of all of these people. And we need to start talking about constitutional reform. The bills they're passing in Parliament are quite very biased, predisposed, as opposed to being impersonal as they should be. The doctrine of separation of church and state is not enshrined within the Nigerian Constitution, which is, I think, the catalyst for all of the problems that we have now, because there is no separation of the doctrine of separation of church and state from the doctrine of tribalism that Nigerians currently allow to rule them. We find ourselves at a subduction point wherein we're allowing traditions and outdated, antiquated cultural practices to rule us rather than the rule of law, which should be the single most authoritative instrument used to govern the country. So what we should be talking about in Parliament and on social media as well as young people is reforming the Nigerian Constitution. Thank you.
A lot of people online agree with you. There was just a spike in people saying, yes, this constitution needs to be checked and redone. And I know that a lot of people agree with that. Not many people have a lot of confidence in the 1999 constitution and a lot of the holes and gaps that exist there. Someone else, Abdullahi Suleiman, also pointed out virtually in the comment section that I've heard a lot of problems from us today. What are the solutions? So I only want to hear solutions now. Let me start with you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Inaya Chukwemeka from Voice Out Nigeria. So we have a problem in this country. Our leaders need to listen and hear from the youth. They have to understand what are our priorities as a nation. The problem is in our budget, a lot of lawmakers, both state and federal level, It's so shameful that we have youth empowerment to be things like motorbikes, keke napep, and the rest. That is not what we need to change this nation. If we have to end poverty as a nation, we have to look deep down and build industries as a nation. Our nation is in deep need of industries. Our nation, every state is blessed with so many mineral resources. Ekiti State has 25 good mineral resources. Why can't we emphasize on this and make a change? Building of industries is what we desire. Hoodlums, those we call hoodlums today, is because they don't have a job. It's because they are being affected by policies. If we can build industries, a lot of our youth will work, the internal revenue of our nation will grow, and the GDP will be high. That is the way we should follow, and that is the way we should grow. Thank you.
So we haven't heard from you. So solutions only.
Good afternoon, everyone. All protocols duly observed. My name is Dara Adekunle. I'm a UN Women Intergenerational mentee. We just concluded the mentorship program. And I want to really emphasize the need for mentorship. And I have a question to our leaders and also to our older generation. And the question is, how much do you trust us? Because I imagine all of us here sitting in the House of Assembly, even for one day, trying to provide solutions to the issues of this country. So how can you trust us? One thing I admire about this current generation is that from their younger age, it seems that, Steve, they have been there. So they've been there from young ages, running businesses and being in government. But from the statistics, we see the very low representation of young people, even in the government. This, I think, can change via mentorship. And I want to also emphasize the role of women, because I believe that when we begin to see more women representation, I think we will see the issues of youth, and the challenges youth face in bringing out their voice that opportunity will be there, and women, it's going to create a balance, because when you hear gender or when you hear youth and women empowerment, they all go together. So I believe that when there's more representation of women, I believe there will be more representation of youth too, and our older generation should step back a bit and let us lead and guide us through. Thank you.
Step back a bit. I know the conversation is still sweet, but I want to quickly throw things back to special guests here to give us some words. Like we've said, this conversation is only just starting and we want to keep this ongoing. But I'll start off with the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs and Social Development, Dame Pauline Kedem-Talent, to give us a word on what you've heard so far and what you have to say.
Okay. My very dear, distinguished youths, I am very happy with all that I've had. I'm excited because I've had you pour out your hearts. Everything you said is genuine, is true. All I want you to understand is that you must, number one, have faith in your country. There is no country in the world that doesn't have problems and issues. You must first love your country. You must have faith, because most of the write-ups from those that are commenting I've been following is like a lot of youths have lost hope in the country or have lost hope in the leadership. I want to appeal to your conscience and to call for peace and to call for calm. I'm talking to you as a mother, and all the issues you've raised are seeking for urgent attention, and I want to assure you that Mr. President is fully committed and concerned. The NSAS youths and all that has been happening is a serious wake-up call, and the Honorable Minister of Youths and Sports and my humble self and all of us in the cabinet, nobody has ever slept over this matter. You have seen clearly the intervention programs Mr. President has done. For the first time in the history of this country, there's no government that has put in so much for the youth than this government. When Mr. President asked us to move back to our states, the dialogue I had with the youths in my state, what I discovered is communication. A lot of youths are not even aware of most of these intervention programs. And if they're not aware and they don't key in, how can they benefit? So there are a lot out there. And the internet, most of these things are online that you should key in. And the important thing is calm down. The way we're having this conversation is fantastic, it's beautiful, because you can only address problems in a calm situation through dialogue. Even the Nigerian Civil War ended up on a round table. I believe, and I strongly believe, that we are making progress with this conversation. The Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports has never slept over this matter. The President has never slept over this matter. The Minister of Women Affairs, as a mother ministry, we are with you. But all we are asking is give peace a chance, calm down, and we will work together. There should be better communication, because communication gap has been most of the problems. I gave you an example of my state, and I've discovered in most of the states, most of the youths don't even know where these programs are. But the Minister of Sports have always been on the media explaining to the youth. So I appeal to you, calm down, give peace a chance. There's no country better than Nigeria. Don't condemn your country, love your country. There's no country in the world that doesn't have problems. Let's reason together, let's dialogue together. Where you need more explanation, we have statistics, the minister is there, we are all there, we will address these issues. But believe in us and give us the benefit of doubt. I reassure you, I am excited with this conversation and I want it to continue. But just have some trust. Don't give up on your country, and destruction will not help us. You are destroying your future. All that has been destroyed is what you should use, it's for all of us, and the future is yours. So I am appealing for calm and understanding. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone here, Madam Amina, and of course, the Minister of Women Affairs. But most importantly, to our youth who are in this room, and some of the adults, but also the youth who are joining us virtually. I think for me, if you just let me take a pass, I'll even prefer not to speak, because I have a red book here and I've written down stuff in about 10 pages. This has been very energizing and rewarding for me. But of course, as the Minister of Youth and Sport, I will say a few words. For me, there are lessons learned from the NSAS protest. And what are these lessons? Lessons on the part of the youth, and lessons on the part of government. As Minister for Youth and Sports, I wear both caps. I have to be in the mood, in the mind of the youth, to know what they're thinking, to know what they need, and to also develop programs that meet these needs, their aspirations, their dreams, their desires. But also as part of government, I need to also find a way to communicate the needs of the youth to government in such a way that they turn into policies. So I have to find the right policies. I have to find the resources needed to be able to meet these demands. So the starting point is the youth bulge we have is real, not just in our country, but across the continent, but more so in our country. And the demands of this youth population keeps increasing, and government must find a way in which to meet the demands of this population. But also, what is very clear is that we must ratchet up the number of our youth. Whatever the programs government has, it is now a game of numbers. I told someone jokingly that imagine if, apart from the NPower that took 500,000 youth and engaged them for 2 years, if we have 4 similar programs in which the youth are benefiting, 500,000, 300,000, I said perhaps the army of those that joined, of the youth that joined the NSAS protest wouldn't have been that much, which speaks to the fact that most of our youth, because they are underemployed, because they are frustrated, because of lack of opportunities, saw the protest beyond the police brutality as an opportunity for activism, an opportunity to speak the truth to power, an opportunity to hold the feet of those in power to the fire, an opportunity to make demands. And we've seen how that has panned out. Beyond the 5 demands made, we've seen an expansion of the demands and the desires of the youth, and government clearly has its job cut out. I have my job cut out as a Minister of Youth particularly. But it's important for me. The major lesson is that we move the protest. We move from protest to action, to engagement, and then to solutions. You can read. We're all educated. Read the history book. No matter what it is, you must move that protest, guide it into action, get to sit around the table. Let's have this conversation. I've taken some notes from here. I'll tell you 1 or 2 things I've done. First, there's a clear paradigm shift from youth empowerment. The focus now is on youth investment. And we have caught on to that, and it's dated even before the answers. The time of just mere empowerment is over. Empowerment is not enough. Empowerment just puts stipends in the pocket of our youth. It is not sustainable. We need to invest directly in the ideas, give them opportunity to be self-starters, wealth creators, employers of labor, so that they can contribute. They can also meet their aspirations. And government has keyed into that. And that's why we had the NYIF, the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, 75 billion. It's a ring-fenced fund that can only be used to invest in our youth, between 250,000 to 50 million. I will wrap up in 2 minutes. But also, beyond that, we have also learned from what has come out. We need to increase and accelerate the level of onboarding of our youth to the programs that the government has. It's a game of numbers. And there is a need to make sure that we provide the information cascades down. We also provide the opportunities. We make sure that we have a tabula rasa in such a way that there's a level playing field. What qualifies you most is that you're a Nigerian youth and you have the benefit of the process. Even if eventually you don't get it, you know that it's not because someone else has gamed you in the system. You know, it's a very tall order, but we can start to make that approach. And I think that Overall, there is a new orientation and thinking in government. Most of the programs we have were dated before NSAS. There's been no new program created for the youth. But what we've learned is that we need to deepen these programs. We need to create awareness. We need to onboard and accelerate the number of our youth. It's a game of numbers. And when we look at it at the end of next year, for instance, you have 200,000, 250,000 youth on the part of entrepreneurship supported by government. There's a multiplier effect because there's a value chain in most industries. You also look at, in terms of education, how do we support them? Not just the university education, technical skills, vocational education. We must have that orientation in our education. Above all, the system. I like what you said. Is it about the system or those in power? For me, it's about institutions, what I call institutional rationalization. Do we have institutions that endure, irrespective of who is in power? Do we have institutions that can take care of youth development from time to time? And I think, finally, this government will find the resources that is necessary for the huge population of our youth. I can promise you that. As we speak, under the stimulus program for 12 months, we've been able to secure 4.1 billion to train between 250,000 to 500,000 youth in 7 critical areas, not just digital skills, mobile device training, stimulus or green energy program. They're just quite a list of them, and we're going to roll them out. The youth of this country must also apply themselves to these opportunities. See, unless you start a race, you cannot expect to win. There's a deficit gap, but you must also give the government the benefit of the doubt. If the opportunities are there, if you don't take up the opportunities, then you have no basis to complain. We'll make those opportunities available. We'll engage you on your platform, the social media platform, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, call it whatever. And I can say just this week, I took on 2 young, one is 26 years old, the other is 25 years old. They've joined my team as youth development interns. They'll be working with me. We also hold virtual meetings every Friday. We've done 5 virtual meetings every Friday. We have 23,000, 10,000, 15,000 youth join us. And I bring ministers on to answer the hard questions. We also listen, and then we act. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. It was good there to hear you talk about Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'll take that to mean that the talks about social media censorship is just a rumor. We'll leave it at that. Let's go now to the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations.
Thank you very much, everyone. First, let me just say that this discussion is probably one of the best that I've had this year, where we have faced a crisis around the world every day, dealing with one country or another, whether it's health, it's socioeconomic, it's conflict, it's humanitarian. But this is one of the most constructive conversations I've had, which gives me a huge amount of hope. And it's coming from my country, so I'm very proud. But I also want to thank the 2 ministers, because it was very important for us today in the United Nations to come with our collaborators, those that we partner with here, is government. And until there's such time in the world where you start scrapping governments, government matters, strong institutions matter, and their representation is important. We can do lots to improve it, but we have to recognize it so that we can engage with it. So I'm really, really very pleased, and thank you both very much for joining. For all those that are online, it's been amazing. I've also been watching the chat, and some of them have been saying to you, can you just let me say one thing? And you have not allowed them. So maybe they can just, harvest this chat, because I think it's really important for us to also hear from there. You've given me lots of homework to go back to the UN with, and my colleagues are in the room, and they're also picking up on the things that we must continue. If there is anything, this kind of a dialogue and a convening must continue to happen, because I think the conversations need not to wait until there's a crisis. There needs to be communication. We need to be having really robust discussions. You were quite polite today, I must say. And I think that sometimes, one or 2 of you need to get a little more passionate about it. So I'll just take it that we're being polite. What I do want to say to you is that you're not alone, Nigerian youth. What is happening in this country is happening across the world. And I think that, what has happened in the last few weeks, you won. You put 5 asks out there, and you got them. but you lost because it didn't end well. And now you come back stronger because of it. You must come back stronger because of it. There are youth around the world that are protesting and still yet to have their rights answered. But in this case, something did happen. And we have to acknowledge, even if the glass is some full, we have to acknowledge it. Otherwise, we won't be able to focus on what we need to fill. We'll keep remaining in the past of where we feel we didn't quite get everything. You never get everything. You aim for it and you don't fail for want of trying, but what you get, you march on with, and you get more and more and more until eventually you hand the baton over. And why do I say that? Because frankly, I was you not so long ago. Also fighting, also frustrated, also incredibly angry. But now, you know, I'm slightly older and children and grandchildren, and I'm really hopeful in the intergenerational transition that must happen in this country. If we are to learn anything, the intergenerational transition must happen. I won't be able to do justice to everything that you've said today, but it's very clear to me that in a country like Nigeria, we do have many complex situations. We're still, you know, we're 60 years old, and we're still growing. There are things that we've done well and things that we've not done very well. But we do have a three-tier government with three arms, and much of it is a work in progress. No one here feels that they can all go back to their states and aspire for everything that they wish for. Many that are educated, many that have the opportunity, they're in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Abuja. How many really go back to the states? If we look at the United States of America, what are they suffering today? A few states managed to get with it. Many states were left behind. It will happen here. Nigeria doesn't stay in a couple of capitals. It's in 36 states, 774 local governments. And until we see how it is that we're going to engage with that and do the long haul, it is your life. It is your life path. Because you can't build from the roof. It has to be the foundations. And we haven't done too badly, but we've not done well enough. Because as I heard a number of things that you took note of, you talked about education. What kind of education? I'm pretty sure that the education that we have today is not what we want for tomorrow. What skill sets do we need to engage with the markets and the opportunities and the technology that we are speaking to today? So we need to reimagine education. For maybe not you in this room, but for many who have been through education in Nigeria, they haven't come out with it. And we have to acknowledge that the quality of education and the skills have not equipped Nigerians even for the job that may be on offer. So we've got to do something about the education system, that's for sure, but it's not going to be done in Abuja. We have to ask the local government and the state governments who constitutionally have the responsible for the foundations of our education. And it can happen, because my primary education is what got me to where I am today. Nothing else. Nothing else, let me just tell you. Those are the foundations that set me on the path that I am today. Everything else is additional, but the foundation was solid. My vaccinations, everything. And where was it? And I like to say this all over the world. Maiduguri, Birnin Kebbi. And today, we think that's the back and behind of nowhere. It's where terrorists are born. But they're not. We never had terrorists when I went to school. So it's an environment that created them. And that's why when you talk about exclusion and inequality, absolutely, that's why I think we have what we have today, is that many have been excluded, many, the lack of inequality, and what that does is give you no hope. And when you have no hope, you become fodder for those who want to create instability. And so, who's to blame? I don't think it's so much of a blame game, but I do think government has responsibility. And people have rights. But then with a right comes an obligation. So it is a social contract between government and its people. And today, we're not doing very well. We're not doing very well in this country. I've just come back from 4 other countries. We are not doing well in Mali. We are not doing well in Niger. We are not doing well in Sierra Leone. We are not doing well even in Ghana. So there's a lot of work this largest cohort of youth has to do going forward. And that's why when you see we say from the protest to constructive engagement, this engagement now, if there is anything that it must be, is constructive. You must have the building blocks that you need to build in different constituencies, because youth is not homogeneous. And youth is more than those who've had the opportunity to go to school and have a roof over their head. In fact, you're the minority, right? The majority of youth are millions. You only have to go on campaign to see them and wonder what on earth are you going to do. Every time you stand on the drum in a campaign, there are millions in front of you. So youth as a whole, thinking of the urban, the rural, the haves, the have-nots, those, I mean, you as a constituency, I will continue to say is an asset that needs to be invested in. I hope that our governments, from the local governments to the states to the federal government, will continue to try to do that so that the trust that is lost now, the social contract that is not completely broken, but it's near there. What's even worse, our social fabric is torn. Somebody talked about ethnicity and religion. It's torn. And yet this is, for me, the greatest country on earth. So what are we going to do about stitching it back, cementing the foundations, and coming together to do it? Because if we don't, we're losers all. And I'm absolutely sure you don't intend to be that. Because what I've seen in today's room can go anywhere in the world and stand shoulder to shoulder, if not even shoulders higher than anywhere. There's no two ways about that. So I think that we have to find some of the asks that we have for, because I've heard, when you say you engage government and, well, we tried that before, we've given up on them, we've lost faith. Okay, then what? You need to put on the table some confidence building measures. What are the things, as if you see government doing, you will now start to believe that they're being serious. But what too will you do that government will take you seriously? Because a social contract is between two different parts, or three or four, but it's a contract. And we need to think about that. Some of the words that I've taken out of my dictionary from a long time ago, and I think it's really important, maybe you like to keep them in there, but I don't. I don't like the word hate, to get to a place where you really hate something. And we saw a lot of that on the only mode of communication that is the future, and that's social media. Everything is technology now. Anyone who thinks that they're going to do without social media is a big mistake. That's the way of the future, technology, young people, and urban centers. So if you take to social media hate, good grief, then that's going to be a pretty miserable world that you're going to live in. That needs to come out of it. We need to take that out. The other one is cynicism. Because once you start to be cynical, there is nothing left for you to hope for. Once it's a terrible virus, it's worse than COVID, stops you dead. Because then you can't see anything else. You really can't see anything else. And the other thing that is really difficult to do, and I can see people here talking about it, is really to try to see the good in everything, to give benefit of the doubt, even when it looks lousy. Because it wasn't always like that. So we need a sense of optimism, we need a sense of energy. When you started the protests, I have to say I was incredibly excited in New York. I couldn't talk, but I was. I thought it was great. I thought it was a fantastic movement. Finally, young people are getting up together. They're creating a movement that is peaceful, and they are asking for legitimate rights. But I also, when I spoke to the president, he said the same thing. Something went wrong, really wrong. But I hope we'll take it as a lesson. As I said, you won, you lost, you come back stronger. It's really important for us to do that. The data piece, please don't ever let go of data. If we don't want to leave anyone behind, we need to know where the no ones are. We don't know. We don't have baseline that tells us where every single person or problem or issue is in the country. Data now can be got without us going round filling pieces of paper and census. You can do it with a phone. Technology can get you data overnight. I know how many goats are in my village from satellite. So data is not a difficult thing to get, and you, the guys who know how to do it. So begin to leverage whatever funds there are. I mean, maybe the ministers here are thinking about spending money on building your capacity, and just tell them, don't want it. I want a data hub. And all the expertise that goes in there so that we could use this data to make the case for the investments that are needed. There's nothing more powerful than taking data to show exactly where are the places where there is gender-based violence. Today, the Minister of Women's Affairs opened up a data hub on where we will find gender-based violence. We've not seen that. And the next, I think, is a forensic lab on rape. So, evidence. And I think it's important to do that. Don't leave data behind. There are people behind numbers. And we need to know where they are and where the issues are and to try to make that happen. We have to find a way. I don't know how you young people are going to turn this around, but it is on you, unfortunately. And we, as my generation, should be apologizing profusely. That we have got to a stage in this country at 60 years that we're talking about religion and ethnicity the way we are. You need to get over that. I don't know how you're going to do it, but the strength is in the diversity of Nigerians. We are all Nigerian from somewhere who believe in something. And we need a level of respect and tolerance, because once you start to touch and tear apart and become partisan about someone's religion and their ethnicity, there is no road back. It's very deep. It's your fabric. It's your DNA. So there are certain things that really should be off limits. You need to respect each other's religions and ethnicities, because in fact, they make us who we are, and we're brilliant. Every single person in this room has a different tribe, a different religion, and all of it come together is brilliant. And you need to say that. You need to believe it. You need to work with it. And that's why a room like this, I mean, I don't know how we selected the room like this, but I hope those online have a representation that really shows what's in this room, which is the diversity and strength that we all have. So I hope that from this conversation that we can move forward. I think you should take it to the states. I told the governors that I met just before I came here that I was coming to have a conversation with youth. I didn't know what I was going to hear, but every single one of them said, we have a problem, we have to address it. They wouldn't have said that a couple of years ago. So COVID, in a sense, has created a pause button. Let's reflect. What you did in the protest, let's reflect. So let's come out of all of these challenges that we have better, and let's see if we can't be the ones that make the change. You can't be the ones that make the change for future generations. That you do it on your watch, because your watch is not front, it's now. Our commitment, and certainly my commitment, is to continue to convene the spaces that you can speak, you can be heard, you can engage, you can reflect, and hopefully you can also have an opportunity to live up to your aspirations, whether it is a livelihood, it is a job, whatever it is. That's our job in the United Nations, is that every day, and talk matters, the conferences, is that we in the UN convene. What do we convene to do? And we in the UN are who? 196 states. We convene for the reality of the day, which sometimes is pretty miserable, to the aspirations. And sometimes that gap is really wide, and sometimes it's not so wide, depending where you are. Our job is to try to close that gap between the reality and your aspiration, and to convene for it, and to give hope, and to continue to talk about it until it happens. And it matters, because in this room we may be frustrated, we may be angry, but in the room outside in a humanitarian camp, or somewhere where you're facing gender-based violence, you need hope. You need not for people to give up. And so in this room, I know you're not going to give up. I know what we're seeing is a representation of everyone's commitment, but a frustration that we're not reaching our potential fast enough. So don't have any patience, because then you'll sit back. Don't have any patience, but let it be constructive, and engage, and look for the spaces where you can make a difference, and I know every single one of you can. I have no doubts about that. It's, as I said, been fantastic to engage with you. I think that everything that I've heard, I will take back. In fact, the Secretary General right now, with the Youth Envoy of the UN, is having another discussion with young people, because we have another challenge in another part of the world that we must address. Fact is, you're the future now. And if we don't get it, then it will be our loss, not yours. And that's what we have to build on. That's what we have to do. So I'm very grateful for you sharing your thoughts. I want you to continue to do it. I believe that at the United Nations here, I can see where's Mo, there's Comfort, and my other colleagues, I think it's the World Bank as well. I hope that we can continue to convene these spaces together with our partners. And that you, I think it's important, you set the agenda. Listening today has been really important. And these few reflections that I have are just things that you've inspired me to say at the end of my discussion. Maybe they help, maybe they don't, but they're said, and it's important for us to continue to have the conversation. So let me end just by saying to be continued. Thank you.
I'm almost afraid to say anything else after that, because that was very well said. Thank you very much to everyone here today. Thanks to our special guests for being here. I know a lot has been said today, but if you don't leave here with anything, speaking of our special guests, I think 5 things stood out for me. Education, very important. That, of course, encompasses tech, girl child education, and all of that. Data, we haven't had a census since 2006.
The President just made resources available for the census. The President just made available resources for the census.
We're hopefully going to get there. 3rd, unemployment. 4th, security or the lack of it, which basically affects all of us. And 5th, constitutional reforms. But I think at the root of all of this, the overwhelming sort of belief here is the issue of trust. And I think we need to all go back and think about that. Very importantly, especially those here from government, because there's a huge trust deficit. We have a case where peaceful protesters are being arrested. We're trying to sue for peace here, so it feels very contradictory for a lot of people listening. But thank you very much for hopefully listening to all of us, and we look forward, like everyone here has said, to implementation and an ongoing conversation. Thank you very much. Can we just gather in front here so we can take a group selfie with the minister?
Okay, that's right. Yes, that's right. Can see your face. Can you see this? Sit down. Sorry. Does it work?
Look there.
Yeah. We need to step up.